Okay, welcome to today's presentation, Managing iOS 11 and macOS High Sierra Updates. This is a popular topic here. My name's Nick Thompson, and I will be your host today. Joining me is Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Nick. Nice to join you, and nice to join everyone as well on the far side.
Excellent. Yeah, Mark's our senior sales engineer here, and we'll be diving into some of the more technical aspects throughout the presentation. We're glad to have him here. Let's take a look at our agenda. So for the presentation here, we're going to do just a brief overview of Jamf. We realize not everyone is a customer here yet, and we want to just briefly overview who we are and what we do. But then we'll really dive into the meat of the presentation here, talking about what's new in iOS 11, what's new in macOS High Sierra, and focusing on both of those operating systems on how to prepare your organization for those upgrades and some best practices and strategies for those OS deployments. We'll wrap up with some next steps, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end as well, too. Brief overview here of Jamf. So if you're not familiar with us, this is our mission. We help organizations succeed with Apple. This is all that we do, so we're really laser focused on everything that Apple offers. And we do so with our two products, Jamf Now, which is really about simple mobile device management, really no IT required, and Jamf Pro, Apple management for IT pros. You can sort of see how they stack rank against each other here. Again, Now is all about that easy setup, simple management versus Pro has the complete lifecycle management of Apple devices. And these are what the products look like, all web-based, and you can access them all through your web browser. Today's presentation will primarily focus on Jamf Pro. If you are interested in Now, check out our website and learn more there. And of course, we're really happy to help over 12,000 organizations manage their Apple devices across all sorts of different segments, the ones that you typically see where Apple devices are popular, and of course, growing in the enterprise as well, too. All right, enough about us here. Let's talk about really what it means to offer here day zero support and what it means to manage these operating systems. So we believe that day zero support is very important, and we want to ensure that you, as customers, are able to deliver it to your end users. So we believe this is more than just simply adding baseline compatibility to the OSs, but it's also about adding new key features. There's a lot that's coming out that's new, and we actually go ahead and build that into the product rather than making our users build their own config profiles and upload it to a server where they're in the product and ready to use. Of course, we need to make sure that there's no impact to critical workflows, and we have got a really great beta program for testing as well, too. Highly encourage you, if you're not a part of our beta program, to join. Why does this matter? Well, for you as IT, this is all about helping you reduce any sort of security vulnerabilities on your devices so that when new operating systems come out, you can support them right away with all the great new security features that are baked into there. But it's also ensuring that your end users are kept happy. So they are expecting to be able to upgrade right away to the new OSs, and you want to be able to support that. Plus, all the great new productivity features that are out there. iOS 11 on iPad is really, really great, and you want to enable your users to be able to take advantage of that. And what's really nice is we've got a nice history of providing day zero support here. And of course, iOS 11 and macOS High Sierra is no exception. Again, let's focus on these new OSs coming out. Let's start off with iOS 11. What's new? Well, we got some new restrictions coming down the pipe. So this will enable you as IT to offer better control over these devices. You can now manage some of the AirPrint settings that are available. So if you have any sort of printers that use the AirPrint protocol, you can manage those settings. Additionally, we now have the ability to prevent the removal of system apps. So you may recall iOS 10 started to allow people to delete the system apps that were on there. We can now prevent that to make sure that users are always having the correct apps that they need on their devices.
Yeah, absolutely a great feature, especially for any organization where, hey, part of the reason you're using these iOS devices is to use some of those native Apple apps. Certainly you don't want to have those removed.
Absolutely. Another great new restriction that's available for IT here in iOS 11 is the ability to prevent VPN creation. So if you're using some sort of like network filter, you might have students or other folks that are trying to bypass that network filter by using their own VPN. Now in iOS 11, you can prevent that as well too. Very, very handy for schools. Some new customization options that are available. If you recall, we had the home screen layout payload that lets you define where the apps belong on your iOS devices. We now have the ability to add folders into the dock in that payload, which is nice. And we also have the ability now with cellular iPads. Whenever you issue a remote wipe on a cellular iPad, you can now keep that data plan intact. Very, very handy for those that are reusing iPads out in the field. Now, let's talk about some upgrade strategies for iOS 11 here. First and foremost, you should know that there is no official way to block iOS updates. Apple will release iOS 11, which they did earlier this week here, and there is no official way in MDM to actually block these at all. However, we've got a great command to force update all of our devices. And to do so, it just simply requires that all of your iOS devices, iPads, iPhones, are supervised. And we can have a really nice, easy way to do that by using smart groups inside of our product. And to show you what this looks like, Mark's going to take over now, and we're going to demo what it looks like inside of our Jamf Pro server.
Thanks, Nick. So right now I logged into my Jamf server, and really there's a number of different ways to define targets for doing OS updates. This is something where, as you see on my dashboard, I do have a smart group already where I've already defined some certain criteria that's in here. So iOS version, for example, being less than 11, and also defining a model like, and I have a value here starting with IP, like iPhone, iPad, iPod. And for me, since I also manage Apple TV devices, this is a good way that I can logically separate some of those targets. Your methods may vary as well. Once I have that group defined, though, or really any sort of search for doing an update, as you see here, I've got my couple devices that fall into this criteria. They are supervised as well. And I can do a mass action. So as I go in here, I can define the send remote commands mass action. And I'm going to select this first one here. So updating the iOS version. And one thing to note with Jamf version 9.101 is the text here has changed a little bit. Previously, devices needed to be both supervised and enrolled via the device enrollment program to respect these commands. But now, if a device is merely supervised and at least running iOS 10.3, then it will also receive and respect this command. Really, the only difference that you would have to note from an end user experience is if it is not enrolled via the device enrollment program, that user will have to accept the terms and conditions when that displays on their screen for that update to take place. I'll go ahead, hit next, and those commands have been sent.
All those iOS devices that are linked to your server here just got updated.
Yep.
All right. So excellent demo here of what it's like to update your iOS devices. Again, really easy. You just do that smart group and you choose the update iOS version and choose to download it or to download and restart. So again, iOS 11, lots of really cool new features that are available. All of these are baked into Jamf Pro 9.101. So if you are a current customer, make sure you upgrade to the newest version that we just released last week. And of course, we've got the full 0-day support for it. Happy to continue on that tradition. Now let's shift topics here, and we're going to talk about macOS High Sierra. There's a lot that's new in here for IT. On the end user side of things, of course, we know that Apple sort of has been marketing the High Sierra update as sort of their snow releases, if you will, where you went from leopard to snow leopard and from lion to mountain lion. But really, there's a lot that's happening under the hood that we want to make sure you as IT are aware of. So let's start off again with some of the new restrictions that are available. Just like iOS 11, we have the ability to manage some of those AirPrint settings. So if you have any printers that happen to use AirPrint as the protocol, you can now manage those. And something that folks have been asking for here for a while is now the ability to defer updates on the Mac, not on iOS. We talked about how you can't block iOS updates, but on the Mac, you can now defer updates for up to 90 days.
Yeah, and this really can be a useful tool for organizations that may want to put the brakes on the upgrade cycles until you can test against your IT systems and workflows and make sure that none of your end user experience is changed when those updates come along. So similar to that style of thought where people would be using software update servers, this can put the brakes on updating with a simple profile.
Yep. So nice new feature there. Additionally, there's some new security options. So there's a new way to do file vault recovery, the key redirect. This is a new one here for High Sierra. If you've been using the old version to do key redirects under Sierra and previously, that will only work for 10.12 and lower. The new one here will work with 10.3 and higher. If you're using our policies to do file vault encryption, that will just remain the same. But just know that there's some new options here for file vault. Additionally, we've got a new feature here for certificate preference. So your certificate preferences can actually be set automatically to select the proper certs in a user's keychain. This prevents the user from needing to navigate into their keychain and select the right one themselves. So really, really handy of automating some features here if you're using certs a lot. Also, we've got some new local user management. And so this is a little bit different from necessarily what you get by listing all of the users that are binary reports back, but rather it will help you now unlock a user. So if a user has entered in their password wrong too many times, they would be locked out of their system. This would allow you to unlock that user. Very handy new feature, kind of taking cues from how iOS handles unlocking.
Yep, and with this type of feature, it's important to note that unlocking is for local users. If it is an LDAP or Active Directory user, that account locking is handled on that directory service itself. But this is a nice new feature where, from an administrator standpoint, when you look at that inventory record and view the users that are available, if those devices are running High Sierra and are enrolled via DEP, you'll see those additional options to delete or unlock those users. And also, it's nice that these actions can be done in bulk actions, mass commands. So if you're getting computers ready for the summer at a school and you simply want to remove all the user accounts, if the computer meets the criteria, you can do that in a mass action.
Another great new feature here included in macOS High Sierra is the ability to support Cisco's Fastlane. This was announced last year for iOS 10, and they have now introduced it for macOS High Sierra. What does it do? Well, it lets you set quality of service markings for specific apps on your network. Maybe you want to say prioritize WebEx, a great thing that we're doing right now. You can prioritize WebEx bandwidth on your network or really any sort of critical business application that you want. Really cool things coming from the Apple-Cisco partnership. And of course, everything that they're doing, we are able to support from the MDM side of things as well, too. All right. Lastly, the big new feature here with High Sierra, which probably everyone has questions about, is the new file system. So Apple's new file system, the Apple file system, or APFS, is coming in 10.13 High Sierra, and it is replacing the almost 20-year-old HFS Plus file system. And we're happy to say that we do fully support APFS in Jamf Pro 9.101. And we can do reporting on APFS drives, so whether it's been upgraded or not, and a lot of the traditional in-place upgrade workflows that you are probably very familiar with are all fully supported. Now, there are some changes that have happened to imaging workflows, and we'd like to talk through kind of what that means here for you. So first and foremost, this is pulled right from one of the Apple knowledge base articles that was published about 2 weeks ago. And in it, it says that you must be connected to the internet when you upgrade your macOS. This is because the macOS installer reaches out to Apple servers and it downloads firmware updates during the installation process. It's more than just preparing your drive for APFS. It is updating things like the system's memory controller. It's updating things like power management, your EFI, things for USB-C. It's updating a lot of things. So therefore, we want the source of truth to always be the macOS installer. And because of this, it impacts some of the imaging workflows that you might have used in the past. Here's another, continuing on with that article here, is that it stated that installing macOS High Sierra on a Mac that's connected by target disk mode is not a supported installation method anymore. And again, this is because the Mac needs to be connected to the internet to grab those firmware updates. And also because of this, Apple says they do not recommend or support monolithic system imaging when upgrading or updating iOS or macOS. Related to these two here on the APFS conversion, and this is pulled from another Apple knowledge base article, is that when you install High Sierra on the built-in solid-state drives, that drive is automatically converted to APFS. So SSD drives automatically converted to APFS. Fusion drives and hard disk drives, so spinning disks, are not converted right now. But the important thing here is you cannot opt out of these transitions. So if you have a Mac, solid-state drive, you're updating it to High Sierra, it will get APFS automatically, and there's no way to opt out of it. So let's now talk through what our upgrade strategies are here. To help do that, we've got a nifty little chart that we'll walk through. So starting here in the upper left, of course, Apple releases a brand new version of macOS. And we as IT now need to decide, are we ready to upgrade to this? Have we done all of our testing on it? Are we ready to deploy it out to all of our end users? If the answer is no right now, good news is we actually have the ability to block macOS updates. So again, different from iOS updates, we have the ability to block macOS updates. And we can do so by doing a feature here in Jamf Pro called a restricted software record. So in this, we're actually restricting the High Sierra installer. So you see we wrote in there process name install macOS High Sierra.app. And we're choosing to even delete this application if we find it, and it will kill the process. And of course, we want to be nice to our users and at least tell them why we're not doing it. So we put in a nice little message down there as well too. If you're choosing to go down this path, you can choose to do this blocking this specific process name, and you can even take it a step further and block the process known as install assistant, which is really blocking just about everything else. Mark, you have a comment about that?
Yeah, and this is one of the processes that runs with a macOS installer. You might see even a couple other processes people tend to restrict, and if you are really 100% wanting to stop the update until you're ready as an organization, you might consider also defining an EFI firmware password just so crafty, enterprising users don't boot up to a different installer volume and try to run an install that way.
Right. Okay, so that's the method if we choose to block it. But you know what? We like High Sierra. It's a great update. APFS, we're gonna embrace it fully here, and so we're gonna go down the path of yes, we are ready to upgrade. So now we need to choose what do we want to do to the data that's on these drives. The way that we see it here is you really have two choices. Do you want to keep the data intact that's on those drives, or do you want to erase it? Our users like their data, so let's go down the path of keeping their data here. And so we really outline kind of 3 installation methods for upgrading to macOS High Sierra. The middle one here is that IT does this automatically. So we automatically deploy out High Sierra. And we've got a couple of different methods for how you would automatically deploy it, either using MDM or a policy. Second, we can allow our users to do it on their own, and we can allow them to do it on their own via self-service, or they can just get it from the Mac App Store. So we've got some really flexible options here. And to walk through what this looks like, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark, and Mark will walk us through it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. So getting back to my Jamf server here, I'm going to first start out very similar to iOS updates, looking at different targets. And probably the easiest thing to demo would be the easy button, where literally just one button to make that happen. And that's going to be via an MDM command. And I'll point this out just as a quick option. So with my MacBook Air that I have managed here, since it did enroll with the device enrollment program, I've got options to do MDM commands to tell those updates to take place. And with this, just a quick note with this is dependent on the High Sierra update being available through Apple's native software update service, which we saw last year with the release of Sierra. I believe it was maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the original release that the updates became available there. So just wanted to call that out. If you are doing it via MDM commands, this is where you would go. But today, I'd like to take a look at a more curated method that we look of having the OS installed. And the more curated method leverages a part of the installer called the Start OS install framework. And with that, not to be overly technical, if you know what that is, great. There's a number of different ways to customize things. But we at Jamf, we have a workflow built out that we've documented within our upgrading OS technical paper. And I'm going to walk through that workflow here just on a high level. So first, did a little pre-work here, download that installer from the Mac App Store, get that source, and then you can drag it into Casper Admin. And what this does is it encapsulates that installer and zips it up into a nice file that can be stored in your distribution point. It also flags it as an operating system, so the Jamf server knows that when you look to deploy this, it knows what it is, how it's supposed to be used when you do trigger a policy to make this action take place. So now that I have that set up and that package in my distribution point, I'm going to take a look at my Jamf server once again. So looking at any time that you do these updates, of course, you want to target your group that you want to send them to. And you'll see here, I chose kind of a sweet spot range of devices running Yosemite, greater or equal to that, and yet less than High Sierra. Additionally, you may have other considerations, such as how many gigabytes free of space they have on that machine. And if you're tracking backups and other data protection attributes, you might even add those to your target group. But once I have that target group defined, you'll likely have a couple policies set up. And what I'm going to show here today is really, to me, what I feel is a good first start when rolling out an operating system update. And that's the method of having the installer cache and get stored locally on that managed computer. And then once it's cached, allow the user, prompt them to trigger the install to start with self-service. And really the reason I like that is updates, they take a little time. You don't want to interrupt their day-to-day workflow. And if they can get that work done on their own time schedule, it's great to start there. And then perhaps a little bit later, you might have a different action that triggers it to install with no user interaction. So with that said, I have two different policies here. The first one is set to simply cache that installer. So I have that install High Sierra application that has been packaged up by Casper admin. And this is something that I'm going to scope it then to my High Sierra update group that I had created. And that is set to cache it and run an inventory update right after it's done. At that point, that's going to make that computer fall into the targets for my actual install policy. So as I'm sure most of you are familiar with the interface, how to build a policy, I've got that package set to install the cached package, and I'm choosing a trigger of self-service. So you can define that messaging for them, ensure that they view that description so nothing goes wrong and they don't see anything unexpected, and really so that they have that time available to run the update. Once that is set, from an end user experience, they may end up seeing that application show up in their self-service, here being the Jamf Pro version 10 self-service. But whichever version you may be deploying it to, they'll have that ability and optionally notifications to let them know it's available.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can see that High Sierra has been added here to our self-service app. And again, we're previewing a little bit here of what's coming in Jamf Pro 10. Stay tuned for more info on that down the road here. And let's go back to our upgrade paths. So we've talked about everything that, from deploying it automatically, either via the MDM command or via policy, and then what it looks like to place it inside of self-service so users can get it when they need to. Of course, the other option is if you are doing any sort of erasing data, you can still do deploy macOS via net install. So if you wanted to erase the drives and then deploy out using net install, you can absolutely do that using Apple's native apps for that.
Yeah, and a quick note with that, net install firstly requires that you have a net boot server or infrastructure. I wouldn't suggest if you don't have that set up already to run out and do that. But if you have it set up, a net install can be set up with system image utility from Apple. And if you want to erase, that is an option. And if you don't want to erase, that could be used as well.
Yeah. Just time check here. I know we're running a little bit over. Apologize about that. We'll try to get through the rest of the slides here as quick as we can. But the next big question that, of course, a lot of people have, is, okay, great. We can't use imaging for upgrading. What about our existing machines? What about imaging Macs that are already on High Sierra? They already have APFS, and they already have all those firmware updates that were required for that. Well, we like to call this reprovisioning. And we are happy to announce that we are going to be supporting reprovisioning of APFS drives coming soon to a future release of Jamf Pro. So we view this as a new feature that we will be adding here in a future release coming soon. But of course, there's all those caveats, right? You need to have those Macs be running High Sierra already. They have to have those firmware updates. It will be a good thing to do for any sort of re-imaging workflows that you'll have for your devices out there. Of course, we see where Apple's going with this, and you might want to start considering even other methods for doing reprovisioning besides imaging as well, too. All right. Lastly, we're going to sneak in just a bonus topic here. tvOS 11 came out as well, too. For those who aren't familiar with tvOS, of course, it's the operating system that runs on Apple TVs. Back in the spring, MDM was announced for it, and we support all those features right away, from the zero-touch setup, doing configuration over the air, deploying enterprise apps, sending remote commands to those devices, and restricting some of the consumer features on tvOS. Nice new enhancements here coming to tvOS 11. You can now define the home screen layout. You can show and hide apps, restrict various media content, and you can prevent the name change of Apple TVs as well too, so they aren't all named Apple TV. You can actually define them as something more unique. And some really great features. If you are part of schools, healthcare, hospitality, where you're putting these Apple TV devices in rooms, or really transforming the digital room experience, if you will, there's some new AirPlay security settings that lets you set a password automatically and share them to specific iPads. Really great for preventing any sort of accidental sharing of private data.
And one thing that with this tvOS highlights, you'll notice we aren't talking about managing updates on those devices. Sometimes people aren't aware, but it's something natively by default. tvOS is set to update itself. So unless you have a device in single app mode running your enterprise app, that update may have already taken place, and it could be running tvOS 11 already.
Great point. Okay, let's do some recap here, and then we'll get to all the chat and Q&A as well. So again, we looked at Jamf Pro today and talking all about how it can do zero-touch deployments, configure devices, deploy out the correct apps, gather inventory data, ensure things are secure, and use self-service as a really unique way in this case that we showed to upgrade to macOS High Sierra. Just some tech specs side here. The way it's hosted is you can either do it cloud hosted or you can run it on-prem. Of course, if you do it cloud hosted, everything's just automatic and upgrades happen in the background for you. You don't have to worry about it. We use AWS as our infrastructure. If you're running it on-prem, you can use a wide variety of servers, Linux, Windows, macOS. It's really just a MySQL database talking to Tomcat, very lightweight. We, of course, support all the great things that Apple does in their different programs and services, from DEP, VPP, Apple School Manager. And we have a lot of great third-party integrations as well, too. So if you need to connect to your Active Directory or sign on with your single sign-on provider, or share inventory data to SCCM, or gather all your inventory data into a nice business intelligence app like ServiceNow, and all the great network stuff that Cisco does, too. So why Jamf for Apple? Well, we think that we are the management standard for the Apple ecosystem. Our customers have relied on us to always bring zero-day support to Apple's new operating systems. We enable those unique features such as zero-touch deployment, and we really focus on the native Apple experience and drive user self-sufficiency. Some next steps for you. Check out our website. We've got a lot of great info on there. Specifically, check out our OS upgrades page, where we have some great new resources, and we'll put those links here in the chat in just a minute, that will dive into everything we talked about today and more. And you can check out some of our old webinars as well, too, if you want to learn on other topics. Lastly, join Jamf Nation. Check out Jamf Nation if you haven't been there yet. Lots of great resources there. Over 50,000 Apple IT administrators have discussions on this forum every single day about what it means to manage Apple devices. With that, I want to thank everyone. That concludes the main presentation. And now we will pull up some of the chat and Q&A.
Yeah, and really a lot of great questions here with a lot of people on. We probably aren't going to be able to go into detail for all of the things, but I'm going to take a look back at a couple of the different settings. And firstly, I see a question about the restriction on macOS to restrict software updates for 90 days. Wondering, is that a value that can be changed, or is it simply just 90 days? And that is a 90-day restriction, and I believe it's based off of when the computer was first aware of that update being available really starts that 90-day clock.
Got some questions here about APFS and how it works with Fusion drives. So we pulled this right from Apple's knowledge base article here. So as of right now, Fusion drives are not supported or are not converted, and we'll just have to wait to see when they are converted in a future update from Apple.
Yep, and it's also great to know from a user experience when pushing out updates to these devices, the logic for which volumes should be converted to APFS, that's all handled by Apple's installer. So while betas may have supported Fusion drives with APFS, if someone is installing the final release, that should not make that conversion. There's more documentation on the beta website.
Yeah. And I just sent out the help article there in the chat about APFS. The other help article that we referenced to, sending that in the chat as well too there. So you have those links. Again, kind of asking about iOS 11 and is there any way to block it? Again, there's really no officially supported method of blocking iOS updates. You can try doing some network filtering things of blocking like where it talks to the Apple Update server, but again, it's not something that we would really recommend doing. iOS 11 is a great OS, and every single time that Apple comes out with a new one, they stop code signing the old ones pretty quickly. And so there's really no way of downgrading your devices either. So it's important to kind of keep them always on the newest OS, if you will.
Also, another iOS 11 management question. I see a question regarding using file sharing apps like Box deployed to devices. And I see a user not being able to see that application available within the Files app, the brand new iOS 11 app. An important thing to note is that, for one, it is dependent on the app developer to have that support. But secondly, the native file restriction controls, sometimes referred to as managed open-in, if those settings are set to not allow documents from a managed source to go to an unmanaged location, then those sharing services and apps, they simply just won't show up within the Files application.
Yeah, good point there. Let's see, got some questions about the new file vault, and specifically, around kind of what has changed and what's the difference there. So again, the existing MDM method for deploying out File Vault will work for 10.12 machines and lower. This new feature will work for 10.13 machines and higher. But if you're using the policy, that will continue to work on all of the machines, all Macs.
Yep, and well said. I was just going to add that piece as well regarding the policy. Workflows is the same for the Jamf server to receive the key. And this is one of those interesting areas where you can do the MDM method or the Jamf binary method as well.
Just seeing some chatter here about iOS 11 and Office 365. We saw that same help article that Apple posted on Tuesday, where there's some issues with sending mail using the built-in Apple Mail app in iOS 11. I know that they said that both Microsoft and Apple are working on a fix for that. Hopefully that comes out soon. And to other people have suggested to use the Outlook app as a nice workaround there. Again, we released Jamf Pro 9.101 here last week, and it supports all the new features that we've talked about today. So if you are a current customer, make sure you download all the new apps from Jamf Nation. If you are on premise, install run the updates. If you are in the cloud, if you're a cloud customer, you can request to be upgraded here right away. But we are also updating the majority of our cloud customers this weekend as well too. So if you are a cloud customer, you'll receive that update here very, very shortly. So let's see here. Is there a way to perform the upgrade without any sort of user intervention, both on iOS side and on the macOS side?
That's a good question. So the follow-up in that says often after doing an iOS update, there might be four or five reboot taps. Sometimes hey, your update is completed. Things like that, validate your Apple ID. And some of that is going to be dependent on whether an Apple ID is signed in at all. But that is more of a function of how iOS works. We can tell that command to do it. And depending on how that device is configured, that's the criteria that may or may not show one or two screens after rebooting.
Good point there. Asking about release dates here of High Sierra. If you haven't seen it from Apple, they did announce that High Sierra is coming out next week on Monday, the 25th. So you'll have plenty of time here to prepare for your updates. It should be a good upgrade for everyone. A couple folks saw, we used some of the new screenshots here from Jamf Pro 10 coming up. If you're not part of the beta program, join the beta program and you can start playing with it already.
I also see a question about adding devices to the device enrollment program if they weren't purchased through a valid reseller or channel. Apple has made some announcements on that, and stay tuned. That is something that can be done if you have a DEP account, but you would need to have the next version of Configurator, which is not released, which also needs High Sierra, which is also not released. So once again, stay tuned. That's going to be an exciting way to get non-DEP devices into your device enrollment program system, so then you can take advantage of some of those other unique features.
Got a question here about local user management. So that new feature, let me just hop back to that slide here for a second. The new feature that talked about what you can do for new local users. This is to essentially list the local users that are on your Macs. You could delete a user if you wanted to, and you can unlock a user if you want to as well too.
Correct. And I think the comment here also is just adding for clarity that it's not referring to the unlocking of a LDAP account, an Active Directory domain user. Unlocking of that account is going to be within the directory. But yes, yet you could remove their mobile account. So if you wanted to remove that local user and the data that's on that machine, that could be done with this command.
Someone did comment, Apple Configurator 2.5 did actually was released from Apple, so you can start doing some of those new DEP workflows there. So that's excellent.
That's awesome. I totally missed it. I saw it was removed from the beta downloads page yesterday. So, and then we also have a question here if Jamf recommends the upgrade and that's posted on GitHub by one of our professional services engineers. And Nick just brought it up here. This is something I believe if you search back on Jamf's blog, we have an article that links to this. And this workflow would work as well because it is relying on that StartOS install framework to initiate the upgrade workflow. So as we mentioned at the top of the demo for that, really a number of different ways to initiate that OS update. Choose the path that makes the most sense for you and the users you support.
Yeah, just again, make sure you always grab stuff from the macOS installer, and you need your Macs to be connected to the internet when you do that. someone asking for the link here. Let's just chat that out to everyone. There you go. Great resources. We've got a really amazing community out there that built some really great resources for everyone. If you cache the install on the user's device, but the user goes out and gets the update on the Mac App Store, will it see the cache file or will it just re-download and update?
Great question. That will actually re-download it directly from the App Store, and they would see that standard sort of consumer, if you will, experience. Yeah, and also regarding some of the questions we see are very specific. Just know that if you are a Jamf customer, you can reach out to support, reach out to any Jamf buddy of yours for some best practices or other questions as we look to support our users as you support your own.
Yeah, so I think that just about wraps it up here for us. We do really appreciate all your time here. If we didn't get to your question, certainly do, if you are a current customer, reach out to your account rep. And if you're not, we will be following up here. Our sales team will follow up with you guys after the presentation as well, too. So thanks, everyone. Again, we did record today's session, and we'll be posting it on our website. It takes us about a couple of days to post it on there. Have a great day, and happy upgrading here next week.
All right. Take care.